That will order the February 21st meeting of the HLRB. Begin with.
Going to call the roll. Ari Davis.
Here.
Ann Dreher.
Here.
Andrew Beckler.
Here.
Carmela Hand.
Here.
Ray Henley.
Here.
Jerry Laporte.
Here.
Joan Lawrence.
Here.
Becca Myers.
Here. Here. Everybody being here. Before we start off tonight's meeting by welcoming Ann Dreher. She's our board member.
Hi, everyone.
Welcome. Let's say a couple words as to.
Yeah, sure. Hi, everyone. I moved to Arlington about 6 months ago from Minnesota, where I lived for a long time, although I moved around a lot. I've spent most of my career as a high school history teacher, and when I lived in Minneapolis, I was on the Minneapolis Historic Preservation Board, which did very similar work to what the HALRB does. And there, as I think also here, I probably one of the few or only people who doesn't have an architecture background, but I have a lot of experience in other kinds of history. So I enjoy learning about historic preservation, and I look forward to continuing to work on that and to get to know you all.
Thank you. Well, welcome again.
Thank you.
That moving to the explanation of tonight's hearing and words. So again, welcome to tonight's meeting. Effective September 1st, 2022, new state legislation now requires certain county appointed board commissions, including HLRB, to have an in-person quorum monthly visits. HLRB hearings are provided in hybrid regard for in-person streamed online. Members of the public may attend and participate either virtually or in person. Members of the board, members of the board and members of the public joining us this evening. Next meeting is available to stream via Teams link via the county website. And the board members present their speakers list internet connectivity during tonight's meeting. You can connect via phone. Please keep your device muted, video turned off, so you call on to speak. Public speaker not sponsored items, agenda, pre-registration to speak online at today's hearing work. Speaker slips are available at the front of the room for in-room speakers. I'll call on you after presentation to the meeting chat is active for participants and technical assistance only. Should not be used for discussion, public comment about agenda items or requests for information. All public comments must be shared verbally to the record during the assigned public testimony period. All voting will be done by call of the roll. And lastly, if this is a public forum, today's meeting will be recorded, posted to the county website. All information associated with the meeting, whether written or spoken, is subject to free public information. And with that, we will review and approve the January minutes. Any questions or comments about the January minutes? Hearing none, can I have a motion to approve?
Move to approve the minutes. Second.
Please call the roll.
Call the roll. Amari Davis.
Yes.
Ann Dreher.
Here. Oh, yes, sorry.
But actually, I think you have to.
You weren't there.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I have to abstain.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Carmela Hand.
Yeah.
But sorry, Carmela, I believe you have to abstain as well because.
Oh, abstain. I'm sorry, abstain.
Explain why you say you have to abstain.
You weren't in the meeting, and so if you were, I guess the logic behind it is if you weren't in the meeting, then you wouldn't be able to look at the minutes and see that they were accurate with what happened in the meeting.
Yeah, but usually that, I mean, maybe that's the way the Arlington County does it. That's not the way the rest interprets a vote. I mean, if somebody wants to vote.
Talk to the county attorney's office about it, but
Yeah.
I think that's kind of how we've been doing it.
Yeah, I know that's the way. They, I'm not saying that I think they're accurate. I'm just saying that I think that they're
But we can talk to somebody about that, but I think.
The nuance.
Yeah, we keep going. Ray Hanley,
Yes.
Barry Woodward,
Yes.
Joan Moore.
Abstain.
Thank you. Andy Winchell,
Here.
seconded.
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
thank you.
Yeah, today's agenda, there is no consent agenda this evening. Talk about everything, so that's good. We'll move on to our first.
Okay, great. All right. So our first item is at the Fort Ethan Allen. I'm going to give the staff report, but I thought it would be helpful for people who may not have been in this area before the county to point out where the trench is in relation to Fort Allen. As you'll hear, they are technically two separate local historic districts. So they historically were connected, but right now, given the development in the area, they have been separated from each other. So that I'm going to proceed. So Fort Ethan Allen Trench, a part of Fort Ethan Allen, was built in September 1861. The man-made earthwork trench was an essential part of the outer protection fortifications for Fort Ethan Allen, a large bastion-style fort. Fort Ethan Allen Trench is located to the southwest of the fort. The Fort Ethan Allen Trench was designated a local historic district, or LHD, in 1995, which was after Fort Ethan Allen, which became an LHD in 1978. It is not entirely clear why the trench was not included in the original Fort Ethan Allen LHD boundaries, but they are technically two separate LHD sites. It was around 2003 that a Civil War Trail CWT marker was installed at Fort Ethan Allen Trench. The current proposal is for the retroactive removal of the CWT marker located at Fort Ethan Allen Trench. In June 2023, HALRB approved COA 2314 for the relocation of the CWT marker to a new location at Fort Ethan Allen, and a change to the interpretation of that marker to tell the story of the 107th United States Colored Troops, or USCT, in Arlington. CWT staff members removed the marker in response to the approval of that COA. Given that Fort Ethan Allen Trench is a separate LHD from Fort Ethan Allen, which COA 2314 was attributed to, a separate COA should have been issued at the time to approve the removal of the marker from Fort Ethan Allen Trench. The DRC reviewed the subject application at its February 7th, 2024 hybrid meeting. The commissioners did not have any issues or questions and placed the item on the consent agenda for today's meeting. Since then, a member of the public submitted a comment about this item, which is why the item is now on the discussion agenda. The Historic Preservation Program staff recommends approval of this application as submitted. The removal and relocation of the marker has not impacted the historic integrity of the site. As such, the project meets the intent of standard number 10 of the Secretary of the Interior Standards for Rehabilitation. And now I'm going to ask that John McNair, so this is what the marker used to look like, but John is the representative for this project. He works with the Department of Parks and Recreation, and he's joining us virtually. So John, is there anything you would like to add?
Hello, Michael. Thank you. At present, I know this is the, I think about the third time that we've, had an update on the project for the board. So I'm sure everyone's maybe a little bit tired of hearing me talk about this sign. I'm happy to answer any questions we have about, the sign's original proximity to the trench as best as I can help, or why we feel that it is better suited at Fort Ethan Allen rather at Fort Ethan Allen Trench. But again, I know these are topics we've gone into, and I'm happy to respond as needed.
All right, wonderful. Thank you so much. So I'm going to next move on to mention the public comment that we received and was shared with you all before the meeting. And Mr. Byrne is joining us virtually, and he also signed up to speak. So, Mr. Byrne, you may begin. You have 3 minutes to share your comments.
Okay, thank you very much. Can you hear me?
We
Yes.
can.
Yes. Please do not approve this COA. I sent you some written information about this. The Civil War Trail sign was the only historic marker that was in or near the 40th and Trench Historic District. The Department of Parks and Recreation, DPR, has illegally removed the sign from the historic district without the approval of COA that might have permitted this. The DPR did this even though I sent an email message to Serena Bolicha in June of 2023 that informed her that the DPR could not take any action without that approval. My message suggested that the COA should require DPR to erect an appropriate historic marker near the near the trench, and take other measures that will protect the trench from damages created by people who do not know that the trench is within a local historic district. Nevertheless, the DPR has not agreed to replace the sign with any other marker or take any other of the other measures that I've suggested. Therefore, if you approve the COA, the DPR will not replace or reinstall the Civil War Trail sign and will leave the trench and the historic district without any identification. Nothing will educate the public about the features, purpose, and functions of the trench and its earthworks. Nothing will discourage people from walking, cycling, playing in and around the historic resources. Unlike the 40th and Allen, the DPR has never protected those resources with fencing, chains, or ropes. People will unknowingly damage the trench and earthworks, leading to the historic district's deterioration. They will defeat the purpose of the district's designation and the goals of the Historic Preservation Program, the HALRB, and the DPR. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Byrne. So with that, the matter is before the board. If there's anything that you would like clarity on after hearing Mr. Byrne's comments, we're happy to speak to that too.
Yeah, I'd just like to ask Mr. McNair, can you just review for a second how the trench is identified or protected or?
Of course, happy to. And if we want to go back to the image, first go to the image of the when the sign was previously standing. Thank you. So this was the site of the sign as you would have seen it before we came with our project last spring. Now, as somebody who specializes in providing Civil War fort tours and giving tours of historic earthworks, this sign does not necessarily indicate where the trench is. In fact, when the leaves are on the trees, when everything is lush outside, you really cannot see the trench from the sign. If you go down to the next slide where we can see it post removal, of course, I actually took this picture right after we had all of our snowfall. Now you can start to make out the crest a little bit beyond the trees. But again, it's a very difficult trench to find even from the interpretive sign. Now, I am in agreement that up until this point, that interpretive sign was the only Parks and Recreation indication that a trench was there. But as to the direct impact that it has on finding the trench, we found that to be very minimal. The only way you could get to the trench from the sign was through illegal foot trails, as well as through an illicit bike trail that was going over the trench. All of that existed while the sign was there. So the sign was not preventing any kind of damage happening to the earthworks. If we want to go back down to the text around the sign itself, you will also notice that the trench itself is really only mentioned in the final paragraph as a portion of the original rifle trench can be seen at the south end of Fort Ethan Allen Park, adjacent to Glebe Park Road. That's the only indication we have that there is something out in the woods beyond the sign. So as a form of interpretation, it does not meet the standards of the conservation and interpretation unit because it does not direct people to the resource. And as a form of earthwork preservation, it has not stopped any foot traffic from going over the trench. Now, one of the big points that I would like to make today is that, preserving that trench is a priority for us. We want to make sure that that foot traffic ceases. That is partially why we want to move away from the interpretive side to move towards preservation. Mr. Byrne was very wise to bring up the rope and the stake system that we have at Fort Ethan Allen proper and at Fort C.F. Smith. Right now, we are conducting an inventory of our existing metal stakes and ropes that we have left over from the Ethan Allen project, so that once spring rolls around, we can actually begin roping off the illicit bike path. That would come in place with the metal hanging, please stay off the earthwork signs that you will find located at intervals around the C.F. Smith and Ethan Allen earthworks. So there is a preservation project around the bend. We are also working with the administrators for our internal work order system, Cartograph, to have Civil War earthworks located as separate park resources within the individual parks. Up until this point, if it's not roped off, it is very hard to tell where an earthwork is and is not. That's a problem that we have down at Fort Scott in South Arlington, where nothing is roped off. So by having earthworks, marked in our work order system as historic resources, maintenance crews will know that they are there, area managers will know that they were there, natural resources, invasive species management, they will know what work can and can't be done on certain areas of the park. So there are some preservation projects around the corner that specifically are going to deal with preserving that trench, because the last thing we want is for it to see any more damage.
Great, thank you.
Another.
Yeah, we've had this type of issue arise with the Parks Department before, specifically thinking about the milk shed at and what tends to happen is we get these promises and then when there's no reports that come back. So I'm wondering if there's some way that maybe we can ask John to come back. I mean, we as an HLRB, have an obligation to protect these historic districts in Arlington. And can we set up some sort of a system where you can go back in 6 months or 8 months and let us know what's happening? Because otherwise, sometimes, they come to the meeting and make all these promises and then nothing ever happens. I'm not saying that's what's going to happen here, but unless we set some sort of a system, we've got an inspector, at least an inspector position on the staff. And the inspector is supposed to go out like on a monthly basis and check the historic districts and sometimes get action items as a result of the inspector's inspections. Okay. But on this one, like I didn't even remember there were 2 historic districts here. So it's not something that's high on our radar. And I think it would be a good idea if we found some way, maybe if John would agree to come back in 6 months, we could put him on the agenda to see how things are going. So, fulfilling our responsibility as preservers of the historic districts in Arlington.
That would also provide a public record of what had happened that otherwise might not exist. My question was, though, you had said that this was being relocated. So will the sign, no one's explained that, I'm sorry if I don't know this.
It's the next item on the agenda this evening. Yeah, so
This
basically,
location will be there too, so we can see if it's on or near the trench.
Oh.
so it is
yeah.
not, go ahead, John.
Sorry, yes, again, so just as a quick refresher, because again, this project has a few moving parts, partially because this is not an Arlington County sign. This is a Civil War trail sign. If for those not in the know, if you've ever been driving around Northern Virginia or really anywhere in our area, you probably see those Civil War trails, white signs with the red bugles located on the street lamps and whatnot. So Civil War trails is a public history organization that specializes in putting interpretive way signs to highlight smaller Civil War sites of memory across, I believe, 6 or 7 different states right now. So it's all one unified system. The park system pays Civil War trails a $2,000 fee to develop a single sign, and then we pay an annual fee of $200 per sign so that we stay in the Civil War Trails network. Well, what that is going to mean is that, you know, Civil War Trails will come to us if they find out that through their internal marketing or through their feedback loop, whether or not one of their signs can be found by visitors, because people get the brochures. You might see them in tourist kiosks. People follow the Civil War trails. They look for the signs. And in the case of this sign, people could not find it. Also, in the case of this sign, much of the information that is in the body was essentially repeated in much better detail when Fort Ethan Allen Park had its major interpretive overhaul, thanks to the Civic Association. So now, because the interpretation is so great at the fort itself, the existing information on the Civil War Trail sign is in need of a new subject. We still want to keep Fort Ethan Allen on the Civil War Trails map. We still want to direct Civil War Trails to the park. So we wanted to make a sign that was in part more accessible by, again, moving it towards the Fort Ethan Allen proper park where people could more easily find it. And we also wanted to retool the information because now we have a free 250 words to tell a brand new story at Fort Ethan Allen. So the sign is going back in. The whole purpose of the removal was to put it in at the other Fort Ethan Allen Park on the other side of the road. So that is, the sign is not lost. It is one way or another going to come back once we have approved language to put it in the ground.
I have a question. Are you planning to put any identifying sign at the trench location?
That is a good question. At present, the only thing that we have discussed is the metal stake and rope off system, again, which would include the metal hanging signs that say "Please keep off the earthworks." At present, there is not an interpretive plan for the trench, in part because preservation is taking precedence over interpretation at that particular resource. And
I wasn't really
also,
talking about that. I was talking more about just something identifying why these barricades or barriers are here. And what is the goal of the protection? So just something simple like a label saying Fort Ethan.
well, so if you're not familiar with the park, to get to the trench, you're walking down Old Glebe Road. There's a big brown sign that says Fort Ethan Allen Park. So people are already being prompted for the appearance of something. Again, just right now, because the trench has no identifying markers, because there's nothing leading to it other than unofficial footpaths. Right now, there's really no indication to the layman where the trench begins or where it ends or anything at all. The hope is that if we can start roping it off and treating it like our proper earthworks, that would at least be an indicator to the public that this is a protected resource and would marry the interpretation of that section of the park to Fort Ethan Allen Park proper, which already has those metal stakes. So it's still a far cry away from putting a physical sign in the ground. That would be a different meeting for a different project for the HALRB to consider. And again, we want to protect that trench. So right now we are just sort of focusing on the preservation projects that we can put at it at a pace that we can reasonably meet it. Which is why I was very happy to hear that you would like to check in on this in 6 months or what have you, because again, we would be very happy to share that information.
I agree that I think, a sign saying, please protect these earthworks won't do it. I think you need to explain what the earthworks are in order to get people to understand what's being protected. So I really favor a return visit, and maybe you can make some progress with the Parks Department on putting together an interpretive sign that would interpret the earthworks. So people would know that the purpose of these poles and, chains, whatever it is that you're gonna put up to protect them.
Yeah, I don't think it's particularly complicated. I don't think we're looking for a full-blown historic marker, just a sign that says it's the Trent, or Ethan Allen Trench, not some mystery grave, with the chain around it.
I would say, just looking at the map, and I have not visited the site, but if you came upon this in the middle of a suburb, it would look like an empty lot in the suburb, and you'd wonder, why were the fences up, and, why should I care? So at least having some kind of a sign that either references the fort and says more information is there, or that just puts a name on it, I think is not unreasonable.
Well, I think Mr. McNair has agreed that he would be happy to come back in about 6 months, and then maybe you can take into consideration the comments that have been made, but I want to just kind of reiterate, this is just to prove the COA.
Retroactively. The
Retroactive.
removal that has already happened.
And we're gonna keep, we're gonna talk again on another agenda item. Andy, do you want to say something real quick?
I wanted to say, I think that there's a real issue with drainage. Here's a piece of apparently a vacant lot, which is well taken questions, and some sort of signage. This is public park area, belongs to Ethan Allen, and not just leave it as a vacant lot. Well, because this is the way other trenches in Washington, because they've not been recognized and identified. People have, they're great places for off-road bicycles up and down through the trench. I mean, I think the park should have some sort of signage, even if it's minimal, just to identify that this is a public park and part of Fort Allen. It's a shame it's separated, but that's the way it is. It needs to be identified, in my opinion.
And the sign could also refer visitors to visit the main section of the park where there is going to be more information.
I think staff can continue to work with John and his team about that further discussion. But for now, we'll have to focus on the project.
And just to clarify again, one other thing too. Mr. Brennan mentioned, I guess, in his commentary that the sign was removed legally, but if staff could just talk one more time about why it's not quite exactly.
So it is a little bit of a technicality, but it is a oversight on HPP staff from last year, where when the original COA came forward for the removal of the relocation of this sign to Fort Ethan Allen proper, the bigger part of it, we should have also had a COA processing for Fort Ethan Allen Trench, the removal of that marker at that point, because it is a separate LHD. So we're trying to remedy that now with this current COA, but because the relocation was approved in that original COA in June of last year, that was kind of the go-ahead on staff's part for them to remove it. But technically for the paper trail, it needs to be identified that it was removed and okay to be from the trench LHD. I know that's a little complicated, but that was the reasoning behind that. So it isn't illegal, but it is not technically as correct as it should have.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, I think we ought to approve the motion to allow the relocation with an amendment that some sort of marker should be installed at the same time that the trench is identified with chains and so forth, that at least say that it is an historic part of Fort Ethan Allen Park and that it's the trench.
So I think that the that's a good idea, but I think that the roping and all of that would need its own separate COA. So I would actually advocate that that come as a separate project as opposed to being kind of lumped into this.
As a separate COA or a separate project?
It would need a separate COA, so it would be a separate project.
Is that something we can do tonight?
No, because.
John to come back and he can
Yeah,
bring it with him.
he would have to come back with the actual proposal to show you exactly what it is and where they're wanting to put in those markings and the ropes that he's talking about. And so I think I as staff can advocate with John that project maybe includes something about interpretation minimally for the trench. So he and I can talk about that, but I think it would be more appropriate probably to keep it separate for tonight.
Okay, I'm not going to push the point and insist on it, but I would like to know why it is that we can't amend it asking for that tonight.
I don't.
Well, Mr. Buchner was even saying, Dick, that they're looking into it, and they're kind of investigating it. So, and if you all want him to come back in 6 months, this would be a perfect reason for him to come back. For him having to be away.
That doesn't answer the question.
Yeah.
No, but we're not talking, we're not talking about it. All we're talking about right now is this retroactive COA with the fact that they've moved.
That's what was on the agenda, but that's not all we're talking about right now.
But I think that's the point, right? That's what is on the agenda. That is what the motion should apply.
It has to be
specifically.
advertised.
Yeah, it would have to be advertised. It would have to be
Thank you.
allowable to have public comment.
Right. So if we approve the COA, what is on the agenda to retroactively approve what's there, there isn't anything that prevents us from saying that we welcome them coming back to us within 6 months with their plan for protection of the trench. And we strongly encourage them to include in that plan or their plans or their thinking, some kind of marker that designates the trench and how it can be further understood at the main site. That can be a recommendation that we include as we approve the COA.
I think if you wanted to strongly recommend something, but I do not think you could
Right.
require something of them in the motion or that element.
I think but I guess before I make a motion, I will say, I think sort of middle ground, I think the recommendation seems a fair thing to put out there, because again, our conversation did end up rightly or wrongly sort of moving off. I think it is a very important, very important sort of kernel of discovery tonight, that there is nothing there. So I think that it is worth at least mentioning it in the motion, even though we're not going to. The motion will not require them doing it. Believe it.
I'm
Aside.
ready when.
I move that the HALRB approved COA 24-03 at 4311 North Oldgate Road, 4 feet down Trench Historic District, to retroactively move Civil War Trails historic marker and relocate it. Further, the HALRB suggests that the DPR provide signage and protection of the Fort Ethan Allen Trench.
Can we change that suggest to request? If we request that
Request, yeah.
And that we appreciate the offer of DPR to come back and brief us on this matter within the next 6 months.
I'll second that.
Aaron Davis,
Yes.
Andrea,
Yes.
Buckler,
Yes.
Carmella Ham. Have you muted, Carmella? You might need to press *6. Come back to you. Oh, there I see you. Is that a yes?
Yes,
Thank you, ma'am.
thank you.
Gray Henley,
Yes.
Jerry Laporte,
Yes.
Becca Meyer, Andy Winchell.
Yes,
Oh, I'm sorry, please second. Sorry. Jen Lawrence,
Yes.
Dick Woodruff.
Yes.
Ashley.
All right, so actually zoom out a little. All right, so into staff report. This is the revised historic marker with CWT that came last June, and so this is the final design for you all to review. So I'll go through the staff report, and we also have a public comment for this one as well. So Fort Ethan Allen was built in September 1861 as a large bastion-style fort. The fort was connected by a long series of trenches and earthworks to nearby Port Marcy and the Potomac River. Fort Ethan Allen retains several major above-ground features. These include large earthworks, one bomb-proof, gun platforms, and traces of magazines. One outlier trench, the Fort Ethan Allen Trench, remains to the southwest of the fort. Arlington County's Department of Parks and Recreation has participated in the Civil War Trails Program, a multi-state heritage program connecting Civil War sites across the East Coast since at least the 1990s. The CWT program connects Arlington sites to the audience of the Civil War enthusiasts and includes the county in its marketing and social media. As Mr. McNair mentioned earlier, the DPR pays annual fees to be included in the CWT program for 5 interpreted markers, 1 formally at Fort Ethan Allen Trench, 3 at Fort C.F. Smith, and 1 at the Arlington Mill site. In June 2023, the HALRB approved the relocation of the CWT marker at Fort Ethan Allen Trench, which was installed in a secluded area in 2003, to Fort Ethan Allen proper via COA 23-14. The project proposed that the marker be reinstalled adjacent to the walkway connecting the circular plaza of Fort Ethan Allen to the sidewalk along North Old Glebe Road. Additionally, the HALRB approved different content for the marker, which will include previously uninterpreted information about the African American soldiers who served in the United States Colored Troops, or USCT, stationed at Fort Ethan Allen and other Arlington forts during the Civil War. COA 2314 covered only preliminary details of the marker, and it was established that DPR staff would return to the HALRB when the marker's design was finalized. This is why they are here this evening to present the final design for each dated CWT marker, and that's what you see before you. This wasn't presented at DRC because they don't review content for historic markers, so it's just coming forward this evening. And Historic Preservation Program staff recommends approval of this application as submitted. The area in which the marker will be relocated already has been disturbed for the development of the interpretive exhibits that are already there. And the new content proposed for the marker is appropriate for the site and will capture underrepresented military history. Staff believes that this new location for the marker will make it more accessible. And that concludes the staff report. John, I'm just going to ask, since you're the applicant, is there anything you want to add on this that you haven't already? I'm sure the answer is no, but I want to give you the opportunity as the applicant.
Thank you, Michael. Yeah, much like the removal of the sign from the previous location, I know I've spoken at length on this sign, and I am happy to answer continued questions. I would also just like to reemphasize that as I was one of the main authors for this sign, but I was by no means alone on this. The original draft of this sign was, it was written by myself and with contributions from a wide variety of content experts. This was reviewed by local Arlington historians. This was reviewed by local historians of the USCT in Arlington. This was reviewed by National Park Service Rangers who specialize in both the defenses of Washington as well as the military careers of the Kentucky-based USCT. So as such, we stand by the historical content of the sign that we present, and we hope it meets with approval.
Wonderful. Thank you. So we did have a public comment that was shared with you all for this one, and Mr. Byrne did sign up to speak on this item as well. So let me just pull up the video so you can see him. And Mr. Byrne, you may speak. You've got 3 minutes again.
Okay, thank you very much. Can you hear me?
We can.
Yes. The DPR has proposed to erect a Civil War program site entitled Capitol Protectors, the set 107th USC at Fort Ethan Allen. This is in the program's Offenses of Washington series. However, this is a very misleading, incorrect title. The DPR or the HALRB or somebody needs to change the same's title, and I'm amazed that nobody's noticed this before. The USCT did not protect the Capitol while at Fort Ethan Allen. The USCT arrived at Fort Ethan Allen and other forts in October 1865, just as the sign says. However, that was 6 months after General Robert E. Lee surrendered the Confederate Army of Northern Virginia on April 9th, and 5 months after the U.S. Army held a 2-day victory parade in Washington, D.C. during May. The war was over. Although the USC garrison fought Ethan Allen, there was no need to protect the Capitol after the Civil War had ended. The USC protected the fort from theft and vandalism, but did not protect the capital city. Further, the second sentence to last sentence in the proposed sign states, "It is stunning to think of that from 1865 to 1866, formerly enslaved men protected America's capital." That's the next to last sentence. The DPR, the HALRB, needs to remove or revise that sentence. There is nothing stunning about any such actions that might have occurred. It is well known that the USCT battled Confederate troops during the latter part of the Civil War. On many occasions, there were some pretty big battles. It is therefore not surprising that the USCT served in the defense of Washington around that time. There's nothing stunning about it. No formerly enslaved men ever protected Arlington's capital while serving in the defense of Washington. As I've already stated, the USCT protected the area's forts from theft and vandalism, but this did not protect the capital city. So please change that title and that line because it's just not right. I don't know how this escaped all the reviewers. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Byrne. Matter is before the board, and I'm sure John would be happy to answer any questions related to Mr. Byrne's comments.
I pull up the sign again.
I'm sorry, yes.
Yeah, I guess I would just question the presenter. I guess based on Dr. Byrne's sort of main commentary that essentially that the USCT did not protect the Capitol, what's sort of your response to that comment? I mean, how you find it, or maybe not how you find it, maybe why is it labeled this if there's a second sort of opinion that's sort of historically valid? That's not the case. What's sort of the reasoning there?
Yeah, thank you for answering that. So, or for asking that question. So, we again had a lengthy conversation. Myself and one of the content editors was just speaking on this very issue last night. So, it's a very important distinction and one that really cuts at the heart, I think, of why continued interpretation and reinterpretation of our Civil War sites of memory is so important. traditionally, we have this idea that the American Civil War ends with the surrender of the Army of Northern Virginia at Appomattox Courthouse. We certainly see an end to, the major and even minor land engagements by May. Minor issues occur in the summer, but drawing a clear line between when the war ends is something that historians are still grappling with to this day. We know, for one thing, that in the defenses of Washington, there was a very real fear that by summer of 1865, the war might not be over. As late as June of 1865, you have then Chief Engineer Lieutenant Colonel Barton S. Alexander writing to the defenses, writing to the War Department, I should say, on his belief that there need to be at least 20 forts, 10 on the north side and 10 on the south side of the Potomac, that need to continue to be manned. Fort Ethan Allen is one of those fortifications, and Alexander's plan is approved. As late as late summer of 1865, we know that Fort Ethan Allen has its bomb-proof resodded and even has new gun platforms put in. So, the soldiers that are coming to the fortifications in and around the summer and the fall of 1865, for them, the war has not ended yet. This is doubly so for the men of the 107th United States Colored Troops. They are coming to Arlington from North Carolina, and if you follow the news reports of their time in North Carolina, they are occupying towns and cities where USCT soldiers are being fired at by people in the streets. The lives are still on the line. U.S. service members' lives are still on the line. This is to say nothing of the large Freedmen's encampments, Freedmen's Village, and the two Freedmen's camps that are constructed in and around Arlington at the time that continue to be protected by a constant military presence. The U.S. Army isn't reorganized as a peacetime army until the summer of 1866. So, what we see here is a sign that is trying to emphasize the struggles of the war that were as of yet resolved when the guns had allegedly gone silent. We are trying to emphasize that the story of the Civil War doesn't end just because the chapter in the textbook had to transition to the next unit. There's a living, breathing military history at Fort Ethan Allen that continues well past the surrender at Appomattox and well past the grand review that takes place in Washington. So again, we firmly believe that the content is historically accurate, and we do believe that the title that identifies the 107th USCT as fellow defenders of Washington and fellow defenders of the federal government is an accurate title.
I want to compliment you and your colleagues, John, on the improvements that you've made. I remember the last time that we saw this historic marker, it was mostly about things that happened other places to the 107th USCT. And I think the main comment that the HALRB had was, well, why don't you change this to, this is a historic marker that's going to be put at Fort Ethan Allen. So could you tell us what happened at Fort Ethan Allen? So you've done a great job, I think, in doing that and, focusing on Fort Ethan Allen. Actually, in some ways, I sort of missed a little bit of the dramatic language that was there before, because these men were very heroic and they engaged in battle. And I thought you could have at least kept a couple of sentences of like that in there to show how heroic these people were. And then they finally ended up at the, I don't know if it's, I would say at the end of the war here at Fort Ethan Allen. And I almost would hope, I don't know if you should put that back in, but I like the way it reads now. I think it's factually accurate. I do agree with Dr. Byrne. it doesn't really give I really appreciate what you just said, John, about it being the end of the Civil War. And, you know, it's unclear when the Civil War ended, and this was after Appomattox, but that really doesn't come through in the language that you've put forward here. You know, you don't say it, what its relationship is to Appomattox, when most people were taught that's when the, you know, Civil War generally ended, and that flavor just doesn't come through, even though I think all the facts here are correct.
And I also had just some sort of wordsmithing comments. For instance, the first sentence says, Fort Ethan Allen witnessed the dramatic social change brought on by the war.
So that's the topic sentence. But then you don't, usually when you're writing, you know, you don't explain what you mean by that. So the first sentence is sort of really wasted language, because it doesn't say anything about what Fort Ethan Allen, I mean, it doesn't, the rest of the language should explain what the topic sentence says, and it really doesn't do that.
And then a couple other things, like it talks about, the next sentence says in late 1865, and then the next sentence says in October 1865. And so I think that's kind of repetitive. And are you talking about the same thing, or are these two different events? And those could be, I think, a little bit tightened up. And then it talks about 7 other companies were stationed elsewhere, and I don't know what that means. Are these 7 other companies of USCT, or I guess I'm not enough military historian to know exactly what the companies are with respect to the USCT. And then I sort of agree with Dr. Byrne about the last sentence saying that it's stunning. I think that's, you know, we usually try to be pretty factual here. And I think that gets to, you know, kind of editorializing. And I think it could be restated in a way that doesn't editorialize to the extent that that sentence does.
Just to add, I generally agree with what Jerry said, but I'm not so bothered by the word stunning. I think it is stunning that during the year that the war was starting to end, colored troops were trusted to garrison a fort that was guarding the capital. And this is in the context where African Americans, enslaved and freedmen, were not trusted to be full citizens, to serve, to be, you know, in a position like that. Certainly not in the state of Virginia. And I think it's pretty remarkable that they were assigned, and that could easily be captured in that first sentence where you were saying, we need to understand what you mean by dramatic social change. I mean, there is no better example, I think, of dramatic social change that occurred than assigning a colored troop to protect the capital, which was clearly still under threat in that year when the war might have been over or might not have been. There were still, you know, sort of little bonfires of resistance. And there were assassinations. So I don't know. I think that it could be, maybe I'm overly dramatic, but I don't see any problem drawing that connection with the fact that they were assigned here and how important that was, and that demonstrated a change that our country's been struggling with ever since.
But see, that doesn't come through.
No, I see it doesn't come through. I agree with that.
That's not explained.
No,
the first sentence and the last sentence sort of
it suggests it.
Match up together, but everything in between
no, I agree.
Doesn't connect.
And I'm saying I think something in the beginning needs to say that, and then stunning doesn't stick out like a thumb. I think right now it does.
Yes. And I don't know how far you want to go here, but there's arguments to be made that the colored troops really won the Civil War for the Union. And that's one of the reasons why they were perhaps trusted, because they have given their lives, and they had the casualties were tragic. I mean, there's a lot of historians that say that their lives really weren't respected as much as the lives of the white troops because they sent them into battles where they were almost sure to get heavy resistance. I mean, that is actually true. So there are
This sign though, in this site isn't talking about fighting. It is really after the war. But that could maybe be clarified a little bit if that second to last sentence where it says formerly enslaved men protected America's capital, maybe you could add a little bit of language. Just saying during the time of instability after the formal end of the war or something like that, just to.
What's remarkable is that they were trusted to do this.
Yeah.
That word trust
Right.
gives a great power to it. Anyway, John, gratuitous comments that you guys can take into account, I think.
I'd also say the dates in the red subtitle don't match the time period you're talking about, but maybe that's part of the series.
Yeah, that part is correct. Just to chime in, so that is a part of the Civil War Trails design marketing side. So
Yeah, that makes sense.
see that red banner on the CF Smith signs as well. They wanted a larger Civil War Defenses of Washington series.
Well, that, make a motion. I guess, I mean, is there a way, can we formally share, I guess, any comments that Jerry has and that Ray has and that Nan has with CWT, they can sort of take it under consideration essentially?
Yeah, I think if you would like to send us, if you had written comments that you would like me to forward on, I'm happy to do that. And then we also have it recorded. So, and John was in the meeting, so he'll probably have record of that as well.
We, the past have approved these with changes in language.
Yep.
I don't think we're there yet. I think this is more than fiddling around. I think I'd like it to come back to the, as long as, I don't know what the schedule is. Pressing time schedule here.
John, could you speak to that? If there's a pressing schedule that you all are trying to meet?
There is not a pressing schedule on our end. The issue for us usually comes with coordinating our programming and our projects with Civil War Trails, because again, they have a very small team and they operate across several different states. So frequently when we've had to repair signs or when we've had to do minor textual edits in the past, it can hinge very heavily on whether or not Civil War Trails is going to be in the area on other projects, and sometimes they just may have to meet us further down the road. So the sooner we can get some sort of approval, whether it's conditional or otherwise, the easier it'll be for us to complete the project. Because even if we just put it off by a month or so, I cannot speak to what the Civil War Trails installation schedule is going to look like.
Got it. Thank you for that clarity.
Would you all be open to the idea of us, we have gotten all of your notes and for staff to work with John about editing the marker and trying, because I'm also concerned, as we see, they only have limited space. So we're trying to make sure that messaging comes through. That means there's gonna probably need to be some things that come out of this. But we could work with John, and so it's kind of like a conditional approval. But if you would like, or if you want John to come back, it sounds like John would be a couple months because of the amount of coordinating we have to do.
I think we could look at it again next month. I don't think it changes.
Well, that's
Well,
the thing.
I think it depends on what CWT has the time to they have the time to make those edits to the marker.
I have to say, I support the marker as written.
So do I.
I mean, could it be perfect in a perfect world? But I really think that it is a good.
I mean, we've already looked at this once and given our comments. They came back with those under consideration. Now we're doing it again.
Some of us didn't see it then, but that's no excuse. So I respect that, Joe.
Oh, we can,
Have a vote.
This-
The
yes,
Majority
yes,
approves of it. Well, if they don't.
Yeah.
Are where we are.
two are followed, yeah, so I'll make a motion. So. I'll leave it, I'll just say, the item date HLRB approves COA 23-14A, 3929 North Stafford Street. Request to install new support trails historic marker at 14th Allen, as submitted, including any outstanding minor text edits. That leaves it open to, in case they want to change something based on conversations tonight, they can do so. So that's not, yeah.
There's a second.
Or comments, questions on the motion?
Omari Davis.
Um, no.
Andrea.
Yes.
Drew Backler.
Yes.
Carmella Ham.
No.
Hanley.
Same.
Jerry Laporte.
No.
Bill Lawrence.
Yes.
Rebecca Meyer. Yes. John.
No,
Nick Woodruff.
Yes.
This is interesting. Can you say? Motion passes 5 yeses, 4 noes.
That's the closest vote we've had in.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I think it's the first time I've seen
Like
that.
the Supreme Court, yeah.
Well, that certainly sends a message to our colleagues in DPR that they might want to consider strengthening or kind of taking into account some of the comments. I think, because it's clearly it's not a ringing endorsement.
I appreciate the discussion and the care around the vote. I look forward to receiving those comments because we do have a final review on the Civil War Trails end as well that will be incorporated. So rest assured that the editing is not done.
Thank you so much for your
Thank
time
you for your time.
tonight.
Had it, vote.
Okay,
Third item.
third item. And we do have the applicants here. They've been waiting very, very patiently, so. Much appreciated. Okay, so I'm gonna start with the staff report. The house at 310 21st Avenue North is a pre-1923 contributing dwelling in the Maywood Local Historic District. The applicant is proposing to construct an accessory dwelling unit in the rear yard. Here. Oh, too much. Okay. This would require the removal of a circa 2009 shed on grade, as well as the removal of a small portion of the existing rear patio. The proposed one-story ADU will be 459 square feet and feature a rectangular floor plan with a side gabled roof. Proposed materials include hardy plank siding, GAF 3-tab asphalt roof shingles, PVC trim, Anderson vinyl clad simulated divided light, SDL wood windows, fixed awning and double hung sash, and an Anderson aluminum clad wood double leaf patio door. The applicant also proposes to decrease the size and change the material of the existing driveway. The driveway would be reduced to 336 square feet, and the asphalt would be replaced with permeable pavers. The DRC considered this application at its February 7th, 2024 meeting. staff and commissioners. Just share some extra photos while we're talking about it. Staff and commissioners asked various clarifying questions about materials being used in the project. Although the commissioners felt that the proposal overall was appropriate for the district, there were questions about the proposed materials, in particular the chosen fenestration, that warranted a fuller discussion with the HALRB. The Historic Preservation Program staff recommends approval of this application as submitted. The ADU will not be highly visible from the right-of-way, and the proposed location allows it to be secondary to the primary dwelling, which complies with Appendix G of the Maywood Design Guidelines. Furthermore, the proposed design is compatible with the architectural context of the historic district and meets the intent of Chapter 6, New Addition/Building of the Maywood Design Guidelines. The creation of ADUs has been determined by the HALRB as appropriate for the LHD in the past. The HALRB approved a new ADU at 2314 North Kenmore Street and another one at 3504 21st Avenue North, but it should be noted that the last one was never constructed. Regarding the materials proposed, most are considered appropriate for Maywood. The hardy plank siding, asphalt shingle roof, and PVC trim are all appropriate for the Maywood Design Guidelines. The proposed use of vinyl clad windows and aluminum clad doors should be discussed further by the HALRB. Absent specific design guidelines in the Maywood Design Guidelines for new ADUs, there needs to be more clarity around which materials are appropriate for windows and doors, given that there has only been one ADU built in the district. The best point of comparison would be past examples of ADUs that received approval from the HALRB. The proposed ADU at 2314 North Kenmore Street was approved for wood. The proposed ADU at 3504 21st Avenue North, which was not constructed, was approved for wood windows, but the application in fact had vinyl clad windows. Both applications had wood doors. Another point of comparison could be other accessory dwellings such as sheds and garages. Per Appendix G, sheds are permitted to have wood, aluminum clad, or vinyl windows, and garages are permitted to have wood windows. Additionally, sheds are permitted to have either wood, steel, or fiberglass doors, and garages have wood doors. HPP staff find that the use of non-wood materials would not be inappropriate in this specific case because the ADU is a newly constructed secondary building and would be located in the rear yard and not visible from the public right-of-way. However, it is ultimately up to the HALRB to determine the appropriateness of these materials. And then finally, the HPP staff also finds the proposed changes in size and material of the driveway to be appropriate for the LHD. It should be noted that this aspect of the project could have been approved administratively, but the size of the driveway was too large to approve via ACOA. And since the Brennans are here, if there's anything you would like to add to your project, you're more than welcome to do so at this time. I don't know if Stefan is online. That's your project manager, so he might want to add something.
Stefan is online.
Stefan, would you like to add anything about the project?
Hello.
Hi.
Hi, how are you?
Good. How are you?
Pretty good.
Is there anything that you would like to add just to share with the HALRB about this project or its scope?
No, I think you did a great job presenting it and very clear about what it is that we're proposing here. I mean, if I can make a comment just about the vinyl windows, I understand that they are vinyl, but the grills, just for everyone to be clear, the grills would be simulated divided lights. I know that that's important in historic districts, so the grills would read just like they would on an aluminum clad wood product. It's just the mere fact that, you know, they're vinyl. And the reason why the patio door is aluminum clad is that they don't make a vinyl patio door. So that's the reason for the discrepancy and material finishes. And you know, those decisions were it's basically based on cost. So an aluminum clad wood window would cost more than the vinyl window. But I think the fact that they're, you know, that the grills are SDLs, I think that's in my mind, the most important thing to the aesthetics of the building, not so much the material, but I will let the board figure out what they deem appropriate.
Thank you so much for sharing that. And then Andy, if you want to give the DRC summary.
Well, there's going to be two presentations of similar nature about additions at the rear. This one eliminates the garage, reduces the size of the driveway, and places the new accessory dwelling behind the house for the most part, and only a small foot of it visible from the street. So it really contributing structure district is the house itself, and the fact that this is behind the contributing structure and not seen from the street for the most part. I think it's quite appropriate, and I like the use of vinyl and other materials because I really think that if we're going to go look at these accessory buildings for housing, I think it's only fair to make this more modern structure, both in terms of appearance and in terms of materials. I really don't think that carrying wood window requirements on rear property like this, it is detached from the existing compatible structure, is really appropriate. I like this particular design. I think it looks like a very attractive accessory building, and, a good addition to the neighborhood. And I think the materials are really, I think if you go back to the original Secretary of Interior standards, additions were clearly modern, or if they were, they should be contemporary, trying to be fake. I think architecturally, it's a much better approach. So that's my opinion.
I would agree with that, and I think looking at the drawings, I think it's really appropriate that the bay window has the historic trim, and I think from the approach, knowing that that is what you would see from the driveway, I think it's a really nice touch, and I agree with what Andy said, that this is not historic, it's not original. The use of vinyl doesn't bother me. Having the simulated divided blades, I think, is a nice nod to the main building while also being new, and I think it's appropriate the way it's ended.
Before we move on with other comments, we do have a public speaker who would like to share their thoughts.
This is about actually this accessory dwelling unit and the next one, so I'm combining it.
Do you identify yourself?
My name is Tim Hewson, and I'm speaking on behalf of myself and my wife, Ann Brigetta, who wasn't able to come. I live across the street from this 3307, the Brendans, and I live next door to 3310, the Mappins. So first, we want to say thank you to the HALRB board members, and thank you to Michael and all the staff for your efforts to preserve our historic heritage. We strongly support these accessory units projects and urge you to approve the applications as requested. The Brennans and Matterells did not ask us to make a statement. These two families are trying to solve daunting challenges to share their homes with family members in a way that allows their parents to age in place, keeping their families together. One family's mom and dad would love to live here and be near their kids and grandkids so everybody can take care of each other. The other family would love for one's parent's mom or the other parent's dad to be able to live here. In both these existing houses, the bedrooms are upstairs, which sooner or later won't work for seniors. Whereas these accessory units are on ground without steps, on ground level without steps. The HPP staff's assessment of the use of non-wood materials is appropriate, that it is appropriate, seems to us to be totally correct. From our perspective, only an expert could tell the difference. Also, these are accessory structures that are non-historical. Please allow them to use the materials they requested. Your decisions about materials can have huge impacts on costs, which can make projects like these feasible or infeasible. Please be considerate not just of which materials are more historic, but also which materials these families feel make the most overall economic sense. Note also that the Brennan's project, the one here, will be virtually invisible from the street. From what I looked at earlier today, I think you can just see the roof line. For the Madrill project, only one side, the south side, is visible from the street, and the visible change to remove the garage door would definitely be an improvement. We thank you again for your service and your consideration.
Thank you so much. Okay, now it's before the board.
I have a question. I know the other two projects had wood doors. Is that something that they requested to have? It's been a while with those.
Yeah, so if I'm remembering correctly and doing my research for it, that was what they proposed originally. Same thing with the windows. So
That the first one was wood, I know, but then the second one was the.
Yes, so that one, technically in doing my research, it looked like the staff report reported out that they were wood windows, but when I looked at the specs that were stamped, they were actually vinyl clad. So what was approved was technically vinyl clad, but it was never built. So it's not part of Maywood's landscape, but as it was presented to you all, it would have been presented as a wood window.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Questions, comments?
Yeah, I was thinking about precedent,
Yeah.
but you know,
Yeah.
it doesn't appear that, I mean, with the second one, little question. And I don't have any objection to the vinyl clad windows. Particular content. Yeah, well, possibly wood doors might be comparable if that's what we did in the other projects. There was no request for a different material. I don't have any objections.
Just to piggyback on what Joan stated, I think that this will be, I mean, we're not necessarily making rules sort of tonight, but this is somewhat precedent setting. This kind of keep that in mind. I think that whatever system we do make, that will be your reference or carry over. And again, we always judge, each project by project, but in reality, there is sort of a current precedence that sort of runs through. So it's better made. It's going to keep that in mind. And I think to that point, I think I would also piggyback on what Andy said. I think that is appropriate given A, the limitation, and B, that these are accessory dwellings. They're not the main dwelling. I think, to my mind, I think it makes sense to allow more modern materials on these more secondary structures. I mean, and that's sort of my take on. I mean, I know that we do have different rules for sheds versus garages, and maybe guidelines that's kind of, maybe it's too crazy thing to think about. I definitely think that these ADUs and this sort of secondary structure should be more flexibility in the materials that they're about. So the practical matter, also because they're not the main structure.
Keeping in mind your comment about precedent, I think that's useful to keep in mind. And I would say that in addition, I completely agree, use of modern materials makes sense. It's an ancillary building, et cetera. They have to be practical. But I would also say that I think it's a good thing that they carry through with the vernacular of the building, which it's behind. So I wouldn't want the precedent to be that since it's a new building, you do what you want. It would be it's a new building, you use certain materials. The fact that it captures the ambient, the feel, the vernacular of the original architecture, I think is important in our agreeing to this. So future projects like this should keep that in mind, I think.
Correct. I agree, yeah. And again, they will have to be judged sort of, sort of case by case. We'll have that opportunity to sort of judge or whatever each one as it goes. Other questions or comments?
I just want to advocate one thing before we work on the motion is that I would strongly advocate it has a why. It's appropriate just so that it helps make the motion a little bit more robust with the reasoning behind. And then no one had any objections to the driveway changes, right? Okay. Right.
I think they're commendable.
Yeah, also agree. Right, so I'll start with the meeting targets. I move that HLRB approve COA 24-05, 3310 21st Avenue, Newman Historic District. West to construct accessory dwelling unit, parentheses ADU, and change the size and material of the driveway. Do it for the following reasons. Material, following reason, the material.
Use of modern materials is not inappropriate.
Great accessory.
The design incorporates the appropriate Maywood vernacular.
You could read that back.
Okay. Sorry, Gray, what was the last part that you stated?
Just that the accessory unit incorporates an appropriate vernacular is the word I'm using, but I don't know what the architects say, an appropriate style that matches the historic district.
I move that the HLRB approve COA 24-05 3310 21st Avenue North, Maywood Historic District request to construct an accessory dwelling unit ADU and change the size of the material of the driveway for the following reasons. The use of modern materials is not inappropriate for an accessory dwelling not visible from the street, and that the accessory unit incorporates a vernacular style that matches the historic district.
Second.
Davis,
Yes.
Andrea,
Yes.
Packard,
Yes.
Carmella Ham,
Yes.
Ray Henley,
Yes.
Jerry Laporte,
Yes.
Joan Lawrence,
Yes.
Becca Meyer,
Yes.
Andy Winchell,
Yes.
Dick Woodruff.
Yes.
Thank you again for coming in.
Sorry you had to sit through all over.
No, it was interesting, actually.
Good luck.
You sit around for anything.
Who gets to live there?
What's that?
Who gets to live there?
That's a good question.
Okay. Next item. So the house at 3307 21st Avenue North is a pre-1929 contributing dwelling in the Maywood Local Historic District. The applicant is proposing to convert the existing detached one-story garage to an accessory dwelling unit. Oops, I'm sorry. The proposal includes inserting 3 new windows along the west elevation. 2 windows would be aluminum clad wood and double hung, and 1 would be a vinyl sliding window in the bathroom. The north and east elevations would have no openings per code requirements. There are 2 options for the south elevation, where the applicant is proposing to remove both the single leaf door and the garage door. Option 1, which is the one that you see here, includes the installation of a double leaf steel clad wood door in the area where the garage door is currently located, and the installation of 1 aluminum clad wood window to the side of the door. Option 2, which is the applicant's preferred option, includes the installation of a steel clad wood door at the center of the elevation, flanked by 2 aluminum clad wood windows. The applicant would use hardy plank siding to infill the areas where an opening used to be located. The siding would match the existing that is already on the garage. The existing wood window in the gable on the south elevation is remaining in place. Window right here. Oh, no. Sorry, the mouse. Okay. The DRC considered this application at its February 7th, 2024 meeting. There was discussion about whether it was appropriate to convert the existing garage into an ADU and questions about the lack of organization on certain elevations. Both the applicant and staff explained that those elevations cannot have openings for code requirements and reiterated that the Arlington County zoning ordinance allows for existing garages to be converted into ADUs. There was also discussion about the proposed use of non-wood windows, and it was suggested that the applicant align the heights of the fenestration on the corresponding elevations. The item was placed on the discussion agenda. The Historic Preservation Program staff recommends approval of this application, in particular option 2 for the proposed fenestration on the south elevation. According to the Maywood National Register nomination, the contributing garage was built around 1936. However, in 2011, the HPP staff determined that the garage was not historic or original to Maywood and therefore did not have historic integrity per their research associated with 2 specific COA projects at the time. Given that the garage is not historic, staff does not believe the insertion of new fenestration to make it a livable space would negatively impact the structure or its integrity. Furthermore, staff supports the adaptive reuse of outbuildings in the LHD. Finally, many houses in Maywood have accessory buildings such as garages and sheds. The conversion of the subject garage to an ADU would not be largely noticeable aside from the insertion of new fenestration. The HALRB should discuss the proposed use of aluminum clad wood and vinyl windows and the steel clad wood door. As noted earlier for the other project, absent specific design guidelines for new ADUs, there needs to be more clarity around which materials are appropriate for windows and doors, given that there has only been 1 ADU project. Again, the best point of comparison would be past examples of ADUs that received approvals from the HALRB, which we discussed in the previous project. HPP staff find that the use of non-wood materials would not be inappropriate in this specific case because the ADU is a secondary building and is not historic. And that concludes the staff report. Anthony Matterall is the applicant and he should be online. Anthony, is there anything you would like to add to the project?
Yeah, hey, Michael, thank you so much for being so clear about the proposal, and it was great being online for the discussion about the use of materials for the last approved COA. And I'd like to thank my neighbor Tim Hewson, who spoke for both of us. That was a surprise, and I really appreciate your words out there. So. No, I think you said what we had talked about, and per our discussion, we would, the original design with the double doors was to mimic maybe the existing design of the garage door, the non-historic metal garage door. We would prefer the second one. So I appreciate your thoughts and hope that we can make this happen.
Wonderful. Andy, do you want to give the DRC summary and then we can open it up to everyone?
Well, first of all, I'd like to explain some differences between first one we looked at, this house. Both of the proposals involve residences that were contributing structures to the neighborhood. So what, along with those, they're not involved in this other than setting. This was a garage, 7 developed after they replaced the garage that was built in the 30s. But this is a new, both a new garage, maybe the floor of the garage is probably original. I don't know. But it's kind of a difficult question that what's appropriate with this particular structure, because it's not a contributing garage. It's not a contributing structure as a garage to plan. And there's nothing wrong with it as a garage being that close to the property line and a blank wall. But that's highly appropriate residence, because it basically permits or precludes any windows on that side, and would like to get a few more windows openings for both light ventilation. So that's one problem with the use of this particular garage for residents, as far as I see.
And is that a code issue?
It is.
It's part of the code issue.
Why is that?
So
Sorry
basically,
to interrupt. I'm just curious.
you can see a little bit better here. So you can see how close that the garage is to the lot line. And it's a code requirement in Arlington because it's a fire safety hazard. So we actually had a brief conversation with the fire marshal today. And he explained that essentially if there's an opening of some kind on that side, it is more likely to succumb earlier to fire than a solid wall would, and therefore spread the fire with other properties nearby. So that's why it's a code requirement that they can't put any insertions on those two specific elevations, which does limit the design capabilities of this, but I don't think from staff's perspective should prevent it from being considered to be converted into an ADU. I don't think that staff don't feel that it's HALRB's purview to consider the use of the property. It's more the design of the building. So I don't think we have any standing to say whether or not it should be an ADU. It's more what is the design of the ADU, which I get is kind of Andy's question, is the design good if it doesn't have windows, but that is something that we don't really have control over because it's required by code.
Good. So
Can you put the floor plan back for a
Yeah,
second?
absolutely.
Well, before we, Mr. Winchell, are you done with your summary of the DRC?
okay, I'd like to finish.
Sure.
This.
Oh, second.
I think, can you put the site plan up?
Yes. Actually, oh, they have a plat.
Okay, what? You read what's on there. We've got the 1-story frame garage right next to the property line within a foot or so. And then in back of the contributing 2-story frame dwelling, we have a new addition. Existing one-story frame garage and the two-story frame dwelling are very close together. And that's really a problem in terms of the garage. Used to be required to have 15 feet separation. So the garage is kind of that fact that it's not an historic, the garage is not an historic structure contributing to the Maywood Historic District. And then to place it, convert that one-story frame garage into a dwelling, accessory dwelling that really isn't my opinion, it's too close to the property line. Dwelling. And I think that's, it would have been, I think Arlington, and rightfully so, is concerned about trying to get additional housing and affordable housing and housing for in-laws, whatever. I think that that's all commendable. I don't, my opinion, that is not a good location for dwellings. Okay for a garage, it's, in terms of the property line, it's awfully close to the existing historic structure, way too close. So, and then you're going to take, or it's proposed to take this non-contributing structure, non-historic structure that is where it's situated as a garage and make it into a dwelling unit that sort of doesn't. And the first rendition of elevation was to make it look somewhat like a garage in terms of respecting the facade. But the second one makes it more look like it's actual house of it, not a garage. So what I think you need to look at the site and realize how property owners gotten themselves a new addition. Would have probably, if you look at the previous thing, it would have been possible to have built an accessory dwelling back of the house. That's precluded by now the new addition, which is under construction. And
sorry, I'm sorry to interrupt as you're saying this. That's an addition that was approved as a COA in 2008, I believe. So that was built. I just hadn't updated the plat. So we are not building a new addition. That addition was completed and it was approved by the HLRB back in 2008. So I'm sorry that was confusing.
Okay, thank you.
So are you?
I'm saying that I don't think this way this over garage is being treated as an accessory building for housing is appropriate. I don't think it seems to be in terms of overall what the appearance. If we had this start with, would have probably, I think, encouraged dwelling like the first one in back of the house. This sends a whole . I'm not sure that it should be disapproved. I'm not saying that. I'm saying I think you need to be aware that this is not what I would suggest appropriate within an historic district to do this to this particular garage and make it into a dwelling. I don't think it makes a very nice or reasonable dwelling. It's maybe the best they can do, but I don't think it's up to it. And I think that, that they've got a reasonably good case that they want to use this as in-law or family dwelling. If the purpose is to create dwellings that can be additional housing for anybody, is this appropriate? I think that I don't think the garage, again, is not an historic structure, and converting it into a dwelling is not appropriate because of its location not close to the property line. I think it drastically limits what you can do with the house, and that shows in the way that you look at the dwelling.
Andy, sorry, I didn't know if you had, but on with the.
Okay.
So I guess this is based on that. I mean, just to kind of give my 2 or 2 cents to what you're saying there. I agree it's not the ideal location for an ADU or for a place for someone to live per se, but sort of all that said, I think that the county, for better or for worse, the zoning, the sort of the ADU law basically allows this to happen sort of in kind. I mean, it's not really a change to any sort of law. There's no spot zoning here. This is allowed by right. That's what it was, by right. So I think the point's well taken. It's in the record, but I think that we need to judge this case like the last one based on the materiality. This one is different, and that's seen obviously from public right of way. We should probably focus on those issues there. I mean, it is very close to the property line, and it does limit penetrations that can take place, but that's out of our purview in this case.
I mean, it's allowed under zoning.
That's not within our jurisdiction.
Exactly.
We are looking at design and materials, whether they are appropriate in the local historic district.
But I would also challenge the notion that it's not appropriate because the way it's configured on the property. There's another house in Maywood, a tiny house in Maywood that's just a block away from us. That is similar to that, and it is an historic house. It's just a tiny house on a very small lot, So it exists in the neighborhood.
Rather than continue to discuss this is really outside our jurisdiction. If they get approval by the county to turn this thing into with our approval for the design aspects, if they have the approvals in zoning and in code, it's not an issue for us, right?
No.
And you may not choose to live there. You may not like being sitting on the line, but somebody may choose to live there. And, we're going to have lots of these structures, and they're all going to be built on property lines because everybody wants as much distance as possible. And that, I think, is outside our jurisdiction.
That's correct.
So we should probably not discuss that issue further and leave that up to the county authorities that have that responsibility. Right? I mean,
I agree with that.
Design standpoint, so I think the 2 questions are materials and the elevation. I think elevation 2, the preferred with the door in the middle, I don't have any issues with, given that it is non-historic, it's non-contributing. I think that option 1 is great if you want to use the existing garage door opening, but I don't think it's required in my mind. So if the applicant prefers option 2, I think it's perfectly fine to approve. And then as far as the materials that are proposed, I think that they are in line with what the main house has. The windows are similar. I think it matches the style. There's the one window above the garage door currently, and that stays, and the new windows are the same style. So I think it's all appropriate. And my one thought, and again, this is out of our jurisdiction, if there's any concern about being on the property line, I would encourage the applicant to look at, maybe put the bathroom on that side where you don't need a window if you want more fenestration. But again, it's out of our purview, and I think that it should be approved.
I think that horizontal windows where the bathroom is.
Yeah, no, I think the only thought is that if you wanted more fenestration,
Yeah.
that you could have larger windows on the other side.
Right, yeah.
But again, it's not our jurisdiction. If that is how the applicant would like to use their space, I think it is fine as submitted.
Probably have to dig a trench under the building to do that.
It
Yeah,
does.
to address it, this is Anthony. Thank you for your comments. And the original design would have had the kitchen and the bathroom on the other side, actually, but we would have had to rip up the entire floor to put the plumbing in, to put the bathroom on the other side. So I could not agree with you more. I wish we had a bigger lot. I wish we had a building that was further off of the street and that we had 20 feet behind it, but this is the building that we have, and the design makes a lot of sense. So we don't have to dig up the existing foundation, which is, even the work that we have to do is not going to be inexpensive, but it's going to at least be approachable.
Yeah, no, I completely support it the way it is.
Sounds like we need to revisit the Maywood design guidelines for specific accessory dwelling units, because we're setting precedent that these materials are acceptable. This is the first one has slightly different materials. This one is aluminum clad wood, and the steel clad wood.
That's right.
Yes.
Yeah, so these are different materials.
And then the window in the bathroom is
Vinyl.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we have done bathroom windows that were vinyl before, even in historic structures, because of the humidity issues. So.
And in non-historic or non-contributing structures, we've approved aluminum clad or other materials, correct?
Yeah, I would have to do more like digging to get you specific examples right now. Primarily there have been a lot of windows, things like that, but there have been instances of aluminum clad and vinyl.
I think if we were talking about the main building and the fact that it's a community, yes, it should be wood, but I think given that it's an ADU in the garage, I think it's appropriate to use that.
We do require wood doors on garages, and trying to remember if we did anything other than wood windows. New.
I have it written down. Give me 1 second to find.
Yeah, I read the report.
Yeah, no, it's okay. It's a lot of different things. So, okay, garages are permitted to have wood windows and wood doors. Sheds can have wood, aluminum clad, or vinyl windows, and then they can have wood, steel, or fiberglass doors. And that's all in the, that is what would be allowed to be approved via the ACOA process. Obviously, someone could come forward with something else and have it be approved via COA, but most people do the ACOA process for the secondary structures.
There is an issue. That is, this is highly visible from the street.
It is visible from the street, yes.
I think that
I would argue, I'm sorry for interrupting, that although it is visible from the street, we live on a cul-de-sac with one house east of us, and it's not very visible from anywhere. We live kind of in the back of nowhere, but your point is made.
The point I was trying to make was that this is highly visible from the street. There's a cul-de-sac. What you choose for building materials in that regard is different, I think, and the first one we looked at, which is not visible from the street. What is appropriate? So that's, if you want to approve it, I think materials different.
Thoughts, comments about that, or?
I don't know, I'm thinking about the house in question, and the homeowner does have a point. I mean, it's down at the end of the cul-de-sac. The garage is actually set back farther than the house from the street. You're right, it is visible from the street if you're standing right in front of it looking at it, but it's not like it's a, like there are certain houses and certain corners and certain parts of Maywood that really stand out as being sort of characteristic of the historic district, and that end of that cul-de-sac is sort of, it's a little different.
I think it can. I think one of the reasons we wanted to bring this whole thing to the board is there's two examples, and they were quite different in terms of what the visual effect on the street could be, regardless of whether it's a cul-de-sac. And I think that's the reason this is up before you, so as a board, because you are setting precedent.
Can we see the plat again?
The plat, yeah.
Yeah.
And I think one thing to note too is that, is it really that much of a visible change from the street if you're inserting, if the elevation that is most visible, you're changing the door and you're inserting one window? It's not, they're not changing the footprint, they're not changing the height. It's just a change in the fenestration. So I think that could be just something else to consider in terms of, is it visibly that much of a change from what you're looking at when you walk by it too? So.
Is the current garage door, is it, I mean?
Mr. Matterall, do you know the answer to that? The current.
It is, it's metal, and it's ugly.
Okay.
We heard that from her. I was gonna say what you said, that it's really very much, I mean, I don't see a major difference in the sight from the street. And we already decided in the last case that this is not a new building, but it's also not a historic building. It's not within the historic requirements. So I think that the precedent we've set already, or what we've talked about making a precedent, was that modern materials could be used and changes could be made in materials if it's not part of the historic designation and it's being used in this way. And if it fit in with the look of the house, and they're not, it doesn't sound to me like they're changing that at all. So, we're not going from wood to metal. We're going from metal to, I think, a much more attractive facade from the street. And they're pretty much preserving the materials that are in the house now, from what I can tell. So this doesn't really take us any further than where we were on the last discussion of the last house. I think it's very, very similar. The only difference being that it's somewhat more visible, but the difference is that they're not changing it, whereas the last one was a complete change. It was a new structure.
I think we could all agree that if this was actually an historic garage, and of which there are plenty in the neighborhood, it would be a different story.
Right.
But it's not.
This garage also changed a lot, I guess, in the whatever the 2008 edition. or
2011.
11 edition, that's a little add-on to the top, that really changed the nature of this garage probably more than even, I mean, in my opinion, what we're discussing right now. Adding the roof. Yeah, that was a big change.
It had flat roof.
Yeah. Like one story.
Yeah,
flat
friend,
roof.
friend of mine used to live there, they built it. Or they demolished it.
But I agree with you, Joan. I do think we need to amend the guidelines.
Well, we also need to look at garages too, because what we're doing here is following the guidelines for sheds. And ADUs are not just simply large sheds, they are physical dwelling units that are houses in themselves. And, you know, if we are finding that these materials are appropriate for ADUs, I think we're gonna have to confront the issue of garages.
Yeah, that's good idea.
Well, with that, I'll make a motion that we can put up or down. Right. Let's make a motion. Right. So I move that HLRB approve COA 24-07 33
Wait, 24-04.
04.
Yeah,
Sorry. 3307 21st Street Avenue North, Neighborhood Historic District. Request to convert existing garage to accessory dwelling unit. Well, maybe it's option one, option two, option two.
That was the preferred,
Yeah, option two, request to convert existing garage to an accessory dwelling unit. That's for the following reason. The structure is not historic. The structure is a secondary building. And we need to put something in there about the materials again, kind of tripped from the last one. They're not the same materials, but they are sort of alternative, non-historic materials.
Always replacing pretty much with light materials, right? Or is that?
Well, the door is metal.
Metal.
Door's metal, and the new door is going to be
Steel
Oh,
steel
I
clad.
guess it's kind of metal.
The window, so the window and the gable is wood.
Yeah.
But all the other ones are aluminum clad, and then there's the vinyl one in the bathroom. So they are like maintaining the pattern, but not the materials.
It's just saying something like the modern materials is not inappropriate.
Yeah.
So, okay, hold on. I'm gonna take from the one earlier and try to insert it. I can read out what I have.
Yeah.
Okay. So I move that the HALRB approves COA 24-04 307 21st Avenue North, Maywood Historic District, request to convert an existing garage with option 2 to an accessory dwelling unit for the following reasons. The modern materials are not inappropriate for the structure because it is non-historic and it is a secondary building.
Second.
Add that, sorry.
Go ahead.
That the style of the windows matches the main building.
Okay.
And that coincides with what we did on the first one too.
The existing window.
And acknowledging that the visions.
I'm just thinking something like the design is. Yeah, the design is appropriate to the new level.
Yes.
Okay, fine. I went more specific. I just added, and the style of fenestration will match the existing fenestration pattern on the garage.
What language?
But it doesn't get to Rebecca's point about the windows. Wanted it to
The
be
windows matching the
specific
main?
about the windows matching, right?
I just said that the design is appropriate to the main dwelling. Because aren't we also talking about, we're not just talking about the windows, we were also talking about the doors.
Yeah, I think we just simplify it and
Okay,
say that.
okay. I just reused what we used before, so I'll read it out again and see if it works. So I move that the HALRB approve COA 24-04 3307 21st Avenue North, Maywood Historic District, request to convert an existing garage with option 2 to an accessory dwelling unit for the following reasons. The modern materials are not inappropriate for the structure because it is non-historic, it is a secondary building, and the design incorporates a vernacular style that matches the historic district.
Can we get a second again? I'd like to ignore the first one.
Yes.
Okay.
That was your cue.
It simplifies it for the minutes. Okay. I'm going to call the roll. Amari Davis.
Yes.
Andrea.
Yes.
Andrew Fackler.
Yes.
Carmela Ham.
Yes.
Ray Henley.
Yes.
Jerry Laporte.
Yes.
Lawrence.
Yes.
Rebecca Meyer.
Yes.
Andrew Winchell.
Yes.
Dick Woodruff.
Yes.
Thank you for joining us, Mr. Matterall. We really appreciate your time.
Thank you all so much. I really appreciate this.
Thank you.
Really, thank you all.
Have a good night.
Good night. All right, we're almost done. We're getting there. The next item on the agenda is informational item with the Barkhoff Apartment Section 1 renovation, and the Fair Lynch project team has joined us and has been on for a little while. Thank you for your patience. I'm not going to give my staff. We've all heard this project. We have not had major, actually any changes really to the design other than what was requested by the HALRB during the January meeting. But I just want to remind everybody that the reason we're seeing this, why they came back, was because there were some questions that Mr. Davis had about wanting to see if there, what was more of a design with the landscape changes that they were proposing. And the project team had mentioned that usually at this stage, it's more kind of, wouldn't it be great if it looked like this? It's kind of the spirits of what we're looking for with the landscape design. But they did provide a little bit more information in their package for the HALRB review. So that's kind of what we're going to be looking at. But they're here tonight also because they really need to come 2 times. It's a requirement since this is a form-based code use permit project, which is one of those requirements. They have to come to the HALRB twice for discussion. And we do not have any issues with what they provided because nothing's changed. And everybody was comfortable with what was proposed last time. So on that, I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Riley.
Thanks, Lauren. Hi, good evening, everyone. Sorry we're not there with you in person tonight, but good to see you all. As Lauren similarly, we don't have a presentation either. Like Lauren said, we're here because the form-based code requires us to come before the HALRB twice when we have a renovation use permit like this one. But we did, the only difference between our previous package and this one was providing that requested information about giving you more illustrative examples of what this landscape amenity areas might look like by the time we get to our final landscape plan. So our team is here online. We're open to any questions, but as Lauren said, the design has not changed since last time. Thank you.
Do you think, Jeff, that you can kind of say a little bit what we're looking at on the screen?
Yeah. I would be happy to.
Sure.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Jeff Krebs. I'm the landscape architect at VICA. And, you know, for all of these use permits as they come through, we're proposing small sort of, as the screen says, gathering spaces for the cluster of buildings that are coming through for that particular use permit. In other words, we're trying to give each of the sort of groups of buildings around the site, a more a sort of a local, if you will, community area. So this one is at Building 16, which is on the, I guess, the east side of South Thomas Street. And what we're trying to do here in the center is literally just provide a pervious surface at the ground plane. The final material has not been determined, but it would be, our intent would be for it to be pervious. There are so many existing trees out there that we want to minimize any impact to the root zones as we're going through, of course. So what's really envisioned is, movable furniture, whether that be, picnic tables, small tables, movable chairs, just something that can be readjusted, moved around if someone wants to spread apart for a larger gathering or, tightened up. So again, very flexible space. Perhaps it might be a couple of different materials at the ground plane, but they would be pervious. There's the potential for something like, even a grill out there, some sort of grilling station. And then beyond that, what's loosely shown in the sort of light, you can see the kind of green rectangles, is that we would hope to install some new planting sort of at the ground plane level. Again, this is sort of shrubbery and low planting to help define that space, create a little bit more of a sense of privacy for the folks who are using that. But maintaining the health of the canopy above. So that's what you're looking at in front of you here. The one across the street is very similar. It's just a little bit larger, but it's very similar. Same kind of idea. The sidewalks that you're looking at are all existing. They're on the other side. There is one new one that's related to the handicap ramp that we're installing to serve the two new accessible units. But in this particular case, across the street, there are no accessible units proposed. So we're leaving all the existing concrete sidewalk in place, and then, providing this rectangular gathering space in the center with similar kinds of elements as I just described. And these are intended to serve the units. There are 4 buildings in this particular, in this part. There's sort of 5 total, 4 on this side of the street. So this is on the west side of Thomas. And then you'll see at the top of the page, running sort of behind the back of the sidewalk, the intent is for a sort of a low shrub mixed planting border to help begin to set up a little bit of a distinguishing or a separation between public and private space, right? So that the folks who live here in these buildings feel like this courtyard feels more like it belongs to them. But you can still see over the shrubs. I mean, the shrubs are intended to be low. They're complementing the overhead canopy, but then it sort of puts the public sidewalk on the outboard side. So it begins to, one of the things right now when you go out to Barcroft is it's just wide open, right? There's nothing at the ground plane level. So the intent of the owner and the design team is just to take this opportunity to try to provide a soft edge to each of these buildings to give a little bit of separation. And so that's pretty much it, but I'm happy to answer any other questions you all might have.
Yeah, I have a question. I'm not sure if this is a question for the staff or the applicant, or I don't know if they're even an applicant, but the presenter, will the HLRB get a chance to look at the final landscape plan before you install it?
Lauren, can you answer that?
Sure. The landscape plan will not come before you all. That's something that will get reviewed by urban forestry and other staff at the county when they go through that more technical review process. And what they're doing is comparing Jeff's, really detailed final landscape plan. They'll compare that to this illustrative plan that's in our 4.1.2 use permit package to make sure we're complying with that initial vision for the space. But we do need a certain amount of flexibility for the types of furniture and types of fixtures to put in here, as that's usually not decided on until pretty close to the final landscape plan and actual implementation of the landscape plan.
So this is our final chance to look at the landscape plan, even though it's only conceptual at this time. Is that correct?
Yes, this is your one opportunity to review both the facade, the design of the facade, the landscaping, design landscaping as well. It's kind of part and parcel of the whole process here to make sure that we're compatible with the existing context and we're properly preserving what is historic about these garden apartments here. So this is you get two bites at the apple for these types of use permits.
Thank you.
Comment about, I think the central gathering space is a great idea. And again, keeping as many trees as possible because they're part of the historic fabric of the complex is really important. But, based on the concept seems to be a positive one.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, at this point, we aren't proposing to remove any trees with this particular use permit, just given the way things are shaking out. So the hope is that we could use some of that canopy to provide a little bit of shade, but then not impact the root zone.
Yeah, I would also say that I think you need, since garden apartments were meant to fit into the neighborhood and be garden apartments, don't make those landscape buffers too big. I mean, it's not supposed to be, it's supposed to be kind of I think in the original idea in garden apartments, but it was supposed to be a little bit public space. And I understand why you want to give some private gathering space, but you don't want to go so far that you get away from the concept of these being garden apartments.
Understood.
Right. Yeah, that's a good note. And Jeff, I think you're planning on some like lower shrubbery there, right?
For sure. It's really like a border, it's a low, something that you can see over, but it just gives an edge so that, again, helps define a little bit the space, but you'd be able to look right over it. So, but what's the point? Well taken, given the historic nature and the way it was originally designed. This is truly a park-like setting with a sort of a plain ground plane, if you will, and then an overhead canopy.
Other comments? Well, like Lauren said, I'll be part of the staff that reviews this when this comes through for permits. So I'll get to see that landscape design. All those comments. Yes.
I would just say it also looks encouraging that they're not overbuilding these semi-paved areas. Because sometimes with places like this, you end up overbuilding that kind of area and it becomes more like a private space, or also something that doesn't look very good in the long term. So fitting it into the existing design and making it a part of the garden apartment concept, but modernizing it to have a place where people can barbecue and gather, I think is really good, as long as the footprint of it stays reasonable and fits into the buildings.
Nothing's being decided tonight. That was the final kind of preview of this, but don't worry, they're coming back next month and the following month.
Don't worry.
So you won't miss them.
We can't stay away, no matter how hard we try.
I'm afraid it's more that they won't miss us.
Yeah.
See
you soon.
Thank you, Lauren. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, everyone. Appreciate
Thank
your
you.
time.
Good night.
All right.
That chair's report, and I think chair's report, we're going to hand it over to people heads of the Barcroft team. So, second word.
Sure. Yeah. And sorry, Dan, that I kind of jumped and didn't provide my staff report the last time. After I said it, I realized you hadn't seen what the last one was so much, but
It's fine now.
got a gist.
Yeah.
But we had asked for Joan and Dick to be a part of the working group for the land analysis project for Barcroft Apartments. So we are seeing these renovation projects because this is part of the progress that Jared Lynch team is doing with figuring out, now that they own the property, own Barcroft, what is going to be their renovation plan, as well as where are they trying to do redevelopment, because that is allowed within the board-based code. And so right now the county is doing they just had their first meeting to doing this kind of public outreach and getting consideration from different commissions about this land analysis process. And that's going to go in all the way into May. So Dick and Jen are kind of partnering, figuring out who can attend which meetings. And we had our first meeting, which was really kind of a really just overview of what this process is. We had that on February 6th, and only one can kind of ask questions. Both were there, attendance. So I'd like if you wanted to give any feedback about how that first meeting went and any thoughts that you have.
It was interesting to get different perspectives. I think that there's some people who are just really very much in favor of redevelopment and increasing the number of affordable units, which of course means that we've got to take down some of the historic buildings. And there are others who definitely are not moving that direction. So it was more just an introductory kind of session for people to introduce themselves, and they asked a few questions. Seems like it was a long time ago, but anyway, I left my notes at home. I'm sorry.
No, it's okay.
I forgot to grab them. They asked they asked questions, and we had to address them. And every time I could, I tried to make points about the garden apartments and preservation. The fact that there were a lot of affordable units and there already, and there are ways, there should be ways to that didn't interfere with or didn't destroy or otherwise interfere with the garden apartment feel of the place. Somebody came back and said something about, I had a reaction to that, which I can't recall exactly what this guy said, but well, we're just, we need housing, basically what his bottom line was. We do need housing, but there's a way to do it in a way that I think also can preserve this important resource.
Dick, do you have anything you want to add?
Yeah, I'll just add that, Darrell Lynch has put out a fairly lengthy document that sort of outlines what they plan to do the property and includes a lot of the financing and all of that. And it's clear that in their view, to make it work, they're going to have to, in their perspective, redevelop a lot of the apartments that are around, not the center core around Thomas Street, but along Columbia Pike and along George Mason. Their plan is to demolish those and build greater density.
Sort of like what they did at Buckingham.
Yeah, and although I don't know if any of those would become condos necessarily. I don't recall that, whether they were.
Some were torn down and built as condos.
Well, Buckingham, yes.
Buckingham, yeah. But,
Yeah, I don't know if that's the plan.
Oh,
project, and there are income limits for the rent, for the residents.
It's all going to be rented
For the whole project.
Well, I don't know, because there's a finite number of apartments that they're talking about subsidizing. And if they wind up constructing a lot more apartments than that because of density, that doesn't mean that they're
But I thought
necessarily.
the financing was directed to the fact that this was going to be an affordable housing project.
Every unit, I don't think so.
Great questions to bring up to the team.
Yeah, I
for
don't-
the next meeting, because it is very heavy on the affordable housing goals.
Right.
And trying to show how they're trying to make things actually committed affordable, but that they're also, I believe, they're supposed to be allowing for market rate. So just if that wasn't clear in the first, you should ask again. The next meeting is Monday. So do you all know which one? Are you going or are you going?
I thought you're.
I'm going, but let me just say one other thing about it, that also the plan, under the Columbia-based form-based code or Columbia Pike form-based code, the residential piece of it set aside a specific number of those buildings in the conservation area that at that time were proposed to be conserved in one way or another. And the development proposal is that a number of those wouldn't be. So, so there, there are a lot of different pieces that are going to play out on this. And I think there's still a lot yet to be revealed about how.
Yes, you're right. And they kept saying they weren't gonna force anybody out, but the contractor that I've been working with over the last year or so is no longer living there. And he said, I mean, I didn't have a chance to really get the reason why, but he's living in Herndon. And he's lived in Buckingham for quite a while.
Buckingham or Barker?
I'm sorry, Barbara.
There have been some residents that have opted out because of the uncertainty, as well as because if they maybe make more money than they are allowed to, they might not be able to stay there. But that is something that the county board is working with, the housing division is working with to make sure that there is a very thoughtful transition plan if residents fall into that category. But you're right, there's a lot that hasn't been revealed. Monday is about historic preservation, so that's going to be interesting. I will be talking a lot. So, so that's going to be happening. And then each meeting that they have, which is about 1 or 2 a month, they're going to talk about different subjects, open space, transportation, parking. Parking's going to be. So I appreciate the time that you gave.
So are they planning to take down just buildings, or are they also planning to develop onto open land? What is now garden part of garden?
Good question. Good
Yeah.
question.
I
But
think
right now,
That's a
form-based-
critical question.
Well, like Dick said, in the form-based code, because Barcroft falls into the neighborhood form-based code and the commercial, there are areas where they utilize the form-based code as a tool to do the development project. They are allowed to redevelop in a certain area, which is closer to Columbia Pike, some of the western corner and the eastern corner. The question is, are they staying in there? Are they changing it so that maybe certain buildings stay that would have been demolished? There's some differences in how they're interpreting how they think the form-based code should be. The question is, do
Does
we
code
agree?
limit the amount of currently open space that can be built on?
It does have that, yes, it does.
Complicated,
It
isn't it?
is a complicated, it's a big one too. It's 60 acres, it's over 1,300 units, it's 52 buildings. It is a lot. So,
It's huge.
thank you for your time with that. And I guess we will have a big update. Else from the chair's report? We'll make the staff report really quickly. We just had 2 positive things we wanted to share. So, the Dr. Roland Bruner marker, which is located in Green Valley, had been in disrepair, and I don't actually know when that one had been installed, but it was a while ago. And so we recently worked with DPR to have it reinstalled so the new one is in place. We're really excited about that. The Civic Association reached out to us and asked for it to be done a little while ago, so we're happy to report that that's been done. And then we also, Cynthia and I attended the 65th anniversary event at Dorothy Middle School, which used to be Stratford Junior High, and it's a local historic district. They were the first, you all may know this already, but they were the first school in the state of Virginia to desegregate, and that happened in February of 1959. And they had a 65th anniversary event that we attended with a bunch of other community groups and county programs to share the history of the school and to share more about our program. So we're really trying to, even though we're still down 1 staff member, trying to keep up with our outreach and going to we're trying to do quarterly events for the for our plan update. So that was one of our events that we had, and we talked to about 40 people. It was actually a pretty good turnout for something that's not, on the beaten path necessarily. Yep, and Carmela was there too. So it was nice to see her in person, and she actually, yeah, it was a 2-day event. They had actually Carmela, I believe, spoke at the Friday evening event, and then they had a little bit more casual on Saturday. So I don't know if you're still on, Carmela, if you wanted to add anything, but it was a good event.
No, thank you. I thought it was very well, also very well attended.
That was it.
Can I ask a question?
Yes,
Who's our board liaison now?
it is Susan Cunningham.
Really?
Yeah.
Because DeFerranti thinks it's him.
So he is like helping her. They're kind of like she's the my understanding that she's the main liaison with assistance from Matt DeFronti. I think they're tag teaming a couple different commissions, but she's our primary, is my understanding.
She is the one who interviewed me last month.
Oh,
She told me she was the liaison.
Oh,
So I have a quick question. I have occasion to go through Shirlington a lot lately, and I wonder your question, if there's any update on the Green Valley Pharmacy building? Nothing has been done.
They're still working through permits. So it's based on the last meeting that I was in with them, it looks like they're probably gonna be, so we'll get an update for another amended COA, but they're still working through quite a lot of permit provisions that they're working with other entities in the county to work through before they get started, but yeah, nothing has.
It looks kind of sad.
Yeah, a part of it too. Anything else for the order? Not. Thank you. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.
Welcome. What's your name?
Yeah.
Nice to meet you.